that if we put you at the head of an NBA franchise, you would probably do a better job than Robert Sarver. Now, ESPN published this 7,000 word expose, interviewed 70 former and some current employees, a lot of them anonymously, but some of them like Corliss Williamson and Earl Watson went on the record, say, here's my name, here's what I saw, here's what he said to me. And there's a lot to go with it. Like, here's the headline: allegations of racism and misogyny within the Phoenix Sun, inside Robert Sarver's 17-year tenure as owner. A lot of places to start. Dave, here's where I'll start. I'll start with asking a version of the question Robert Sarver asked. How come Draymond Green can say the N-word, but Robert Sarver can't? Robert Sarver really wants to be able to say the N-word, but he can't. Why can't he, Dave?
Because coming out of a white person's mouth, it's racist as hell and disqualifies you from most anything in life that involves socially interacting with other human beings. I mean, it's so funny to me that Robert Sarver, he denied that and told another story that was effectively the same thing. And it's so like he was like, I didn't say why did Draymond say that and I can't. I said, why do these guys have to say that thing? It's the most horrible word in the world. Why should they say it? So in the context,
I keep saying it.
But I keep saying this most horrible word in the world, and what's wrong with me? I mean, look, the person. What needs to happen is Robert Sarver needs to get sterlinged and find himself something else to do rather than own the Phoenix Suns. Own the franchise, the Phoenix Suns. He seems to act like he owns the actual players with some of this behavior. But, you know, the person I keep thinking about in this story is Chris Paul, and the journey of Chris Paul throughout his career. And the degree. You got to go back to George Shinn, who used to be synonymous with being the worst owner in the National Basketball Association. People don't remember George Shinn, the person who brought pleats to uniforms. George Shinn was the franchise owner of the Charlotte Hornets. He moved them to New Orleans, where they're the New Orleans Hornets. Hurricane Katrina hits, and they're the OKC Hornets. And this young rookie, Chris Paul, it's on his shoulders to make the move to New Orleans and the team in Oklahoma City palatable for two different audiences. And he somehow was able to do that while making David West, who I love, great guy, but David West, two-time All-Star. I mean, that's a tribute to Chris Paul right there. Then, of course, Chris Paul goes to the Clippers, Donald Sterling, we know that story. Then he has to go to OKC again and play for Clay Bennett, which I wouldn't wish on an enemy. And now he's finds himself with Robert Sarver. And so I think when we evaluate Chris Paul and the inevitable lists that we do over who's the best point guard of all time, you know, something we have to factor in is that franchises really are built top to bottom, bottom to top, and the fish does rot from the head. And Chris Paul has gotten nothing but rotten fish throughout his career and still been able to put together a career for the ages.
Yeah, and like the owner, if the owner is not a smart sports person, he or she does just have to know enough to stay out of the sports people's way. But like Sarver, look, man, you want to say the N-word, say what you want, man. If you really want to say the N-word, I can't stop you from saying it, but I also can't guarantee there won't be consequences. So if you lose credibility among players, employees, staff, that's on you. Consequences. Freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom from consequences. People say that all the time. If you get punched in the nose by somebody who is not accountable to you, because there's one thing to drop N-bombs around your office where everybody got to listen to you because you're the boss. It's something else to do it someplace else where people don't know or care who you are. That's one of the things that happens. So say what you want to say, just be prepared to accept the consequences. But that, for the people that are curious, N-words are more a racial macroaggression. That is more blatant racism as opposed to a microaggression, which we have discussed last week with deploying a word like arrogant and articulate. But that's a different conversation. Megan McPeak, Dave raised the issue here. How would you feel about the NBA compelling Sarver to sell this team?
This is the tough part, is that I don't know if there's enough within the story to actually get him to sell the team. Like, I don't know. I don't know if there's enough that they could have a situation where he is ousted the way Donald Sterling was. And that's the tough situation, because now you have players who have to figure out if they want to still play for him. You have employees who have to decide if they still want to work for him. You know, it's been interesting to see how the rest of the ownership group that's part of the Phoenix Suns is handling this, because that's the thing, is everybody needs to figure out what can and can't be done within this situation.
You know, if we're curious about what his co-owners think, here's an anonymous co-owner quoted in ESPN saying, the level of misogyny and racism is beyond the pale. It's embarrassing as an owner. If you are curious about how the team's co-owners feel about this, but you know, but the big difference here between him and Donald Sterling is that with Donald Sterling, you had not just anecdotes and quotes, but you also had that audio tape, and you got to hear him slander not just Black people in general, but like Magic Johnson in particular, who is revered in the basketball community. But and here's the problem, and Dave, I'm going to ask you away on this in a second. Here's the problem that I have with like compelling someone to sell under a situation like this, because, you know, there are two ways to boost franchise value, right? You can do it the Masai Ujiri way, which is to build a winner and let the business people do what they do, and they come together on court, off the court, aggressive winning tactics, and build the value of that franchise. Like the Raptors went from $500 million to $2.1 billion, I think it is, in the 8 years that Ujiri's been on the job. Or you could do it the Donald Sterling way, which is to do something really embarrassing. The league comes in and says, you have to sell the team. And then Steve Ballmer comes in and pays $2 billion plus for the Clippers. Like, he has to pay a premium because he's the guy that's coming in to save the franchise from itself. So now if Sarver embarrasses himself and the franchise to the point where he has to sell or feels compelled to sell, he might get more than he otherwise would have gotten. And I can't square that, like this person making more money than he otherwise would have made, not in spite of being an incompetent, racist, misogynist jerk, but precisely because he was one day. What do you say?
Well, here's the issue. As I see it, I want to first of all agree with what Megan said, which is, it is true that I thought there would be more there when I heard about this bombshell report coming through, because it was hyped to a huge degree. Maybe it got hyped to such a big degree because they knew Sarver was going to do his rebuttal. I don't know what machinations went into deciding how the rollout was going to happen, but it was decidedly not as impressive as I thought it would be. But the comparison with Sterling, to me, is like, I'll just tell you, I've been hearing stuff about Robert Sarver for as long as there's been a Robert Sarver. And similarly with Donald Sterling, it was kind of ridiculous. It's frankly still to this day to me kind of ridiculous that insulting Magic Johnson was the bridge too far. When Donald Sterling had a list of racial offenses. I mean, he'd been given the largest fine in the history of the country for housing discrimination. Right. The NBA didn't do a thing, like all kinds of things on Donald Sterling's record.
Who can forget?
And so the Magic
Dave,
quote was kind of...
Dave, who can forget the Black History Month celebration in March?
Oh, man, that's just because he believes Black history shouldn't have a special month, that it's every month. You didn't know that that's what Donald Sterling believed? It was his statement against February being the shortest month for Black History Month. No, it's just kind of like, to me, like I was hoping for a coup de grace, because it's not like Sarver has bathed himself in purity and goodness over the course of his tenure with the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, and it's we will see where this story goes. If you guys get a chance, listen to Amin El-Hassan on Dan Le Batard's podcast, because he worked for the Suns for a while, and he actually dealt with Sarver face to face, and he tells this story about having to guard Robert Sarver in a pickup basketball game. And so now he's caught between, like, because he knows how to play basketball, playing basketball the way he knows how to play, but realizing, oh, geez, here's the team owner. Like, I can't actually not let this guy
destroy him in that moment next time.
Yeah. I think he knows for
break
next
his
time.
Ankles and put him in a walking boot.
Right. Listen, you don't get successful by getting these handouts. You're gonna learn one way or the other.
Turn that into a clip. on Instagram.
Earn these points.